Let's start the show. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience, and I've continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. But enough of me, I'm here for you. On today's episode of the FB Show, we're continuing our All-32 NFL team preview series, taking a look at every NFL team through the lens of fantasy football. Up next, we continue the NFC West previews with the Arizona Cardinals. But before we get started today, I need 3 quick things from you. First off, smash that subscribe button, power running back style, so you never miss a video from me. We are going 7 days a week all the way through the start of the NFL season. Also hit that like button down below like an open receiver downfield, Patrick Mahomes style. And lastly, you can shoot me a text, there we go, 330-302-1554. That's going to be my hub for all of my fantasy advice this season. And the reason why I want to do it this way is because fantasy football requires a lot of context. I can't just say draft player A over player B. No. There's a lot more that goes into it between matchups and team construction and how you play fantasy football on an individual basis. So doing it that way through text gives me a lot more room and flexibility to be able to respond at a wider scale in terms of I can give you actual in-depth analysis instead of something as simple and plain as take DeAndre Hopkins over Tyreek Hill. So let's just jump right into it. I'm really excited about this team just because, oh my goodness, the fantasy pieces on it. But before we start, we're going to start with Kyler Murray. However, before we start though, I need to tell a quick story, a sad story actually. The year was 2019, and I had a dynasty startup draft for my fantasy league, my baby, my fantasy league baby. I'm the commissioner of this dynasty league. It's called Enio's Finest. It's me and all of my friends who take fantasy very, very seriously, and it's kind of just like a champions league almost of all of my friends. And all offseason, you only get one startup draft. You got one opportunity to get it right, and if you get it wrong, you are behind the 8 ball for years to come and trying to then scramble your way back to the top. So all offseason, I'm thinking, I want Kyler. I want Kyler as my quarterback. I believe in him. He's going to be great. I want Kyler Murray. I even named my team the Super Mario Bros. Because first off, that's just an incredible name. Secondly, video game reference for one of my favorite franchises. And number 3, Kyler pun. Love it. All right. So I was all in on Kyler. So what happens during the draft? I take Kyler in like the 6th round of this startup draft. The reason that he went in the 6th instead of maybe opposed to like the 1st or the 2nd round, just depending on how you draft your dynasty league, is our rankings that we used, the baseline rankings, were for the 2019 ADP and things like that. So we were the way that our league is structured, we're kind of like a hybrid between a keeper and a dynasty, and I'll probably get into that into a future video. But yeah, we were mainly playing for this season, and then from there kind of transitioning into a dynasty league from there. So all season I'm thinking Kyler. All off season, I get Kyler in the 6th round. I'm feeling good, and what happens? I also take Lamar Jackson in the 23rd round. That's kind of like where this story starts. So my quarterbacks going into 2019 are Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. Week 1, I start Lamar because I'm not going to start a rookie in his first NFL game. I want to take the guy with experience, and that obviously played off great because Lamar went crazy against the Dolphins with like 38 points, and that really just started my run in that league. So the reason why I drafted Kyler and the reason why I was so high on Kyler is because I've said this before, I love rushing quarterback. It's what I am known for my fantasy teams. I'm known for 2 things. 1, running back depth. 2, running quarterbacks. So I take Kyler with the belief that he's going to be able to run the ball, he'll get a lot of yards on the ground, and he's also going to throw for a ton as well, because I really like Cliff Kingsbury's air raid system. Just get the ball, chuck it, and let's just boat race everybody, right? So that's not entirely what happened to start the season. Kyler was very just meh. He was fine, but they weren't finding the end zone. And so Kyler's game log for the first 4 weeks, I have it pulled up already. It was 24 points, pretty good, I'd say, for your first game. Week 2 was 18-8. Week 3 was 19-5, and week 4 was 18-7. However, it was the rushing yards that really concerned me because they weren't there in what I was expecting. I was expecting pretty much anywhere between 60 plus. And maybe that was admittedly a little bit too high, but I'm going to read you these rushing numbers, and you can see really what I'm talking about. So week 1, 13 rushing yards. Week 2, 4 rushing yards, 3 carries both those weeks. Like, that's nothing. And then week 3, he had 8 attempts for 69 yards, and then week 4 was 4 attempts for 27. So you can see what I'm saying, right? I came in with the expectation of this guy can rush for 800 rushing yards. Probably around that, like, I know like 800 is kind of like Cam Newton territory, but like we saw it in college. He has the ability to use his legs and just rack up yardage through the ground game. So I was expecting a combination of this dude is going to air it out whenever he can because that's the natural style of this offense, but then he's also going to be able to just continue to pile up those rushing yards, and that just didn't happen to start the season. So Cam Newton also gets hurt in week 2. If you don't know, I'm a Carolina Panthers fan. And to me, Cam Newton is just this fantasy god, right? Cam Newton has the nickname Fantasy King for a reason because every single time that he's finished the season, he finishes in the top 5 of the quarterback position, which is one of the most consistent, unreal things in the history of fantasy football, to have a guy with that ability who does it year in, year out, whenever he's healthy, right? So Cam goes down week 2. Kyler starts the season off really rocky. They're not finding the end zone. What I projected for him is not what he's doing, and that has me really concerned. So what do? I trade Kyler for Cam Newton and Jamal Williams because I also own Aaron Jones. And my thinking behind this was, all right, I'm also like, if Lamar is what I think he's going to be, which he was, I don't know the world where I start Kyler to begin with. So, and then also Cam has a higher rushing upside, it looks like, than Kyler does. So I'll take that too, just because even if Kyler's passing numbers are higher, the rushing yardage makes up so much more, right? So I trade Kyler for Cam, and buddy, that did not feel great all last season. I traded him with the expectation for Cam's going to come back between week 6 and week 8, and we'll be good to go. We'll have our quarterback situation figured out. Start Lamar whenever we can, but if we got to throw Cam Newton, if we have to throw Cam Newton in because Lamar gets hurt or there's a bye week, we're good to go, right? We're basically just building our team around running quarterbacks. And then week 8 passes, and Cam's not back. Week 9 passes, Cam's not back. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, Cam's not back. Cam's done for the year. So as it looks right now, I got fleeced. And then the Cardinals traded for DeAndre Hopkins, who we're going to talk about in just a little bit. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this might have been the worst trade in fantasy football history. And then Cam signs with the Patriots, and it goes back to like, you probably got fleeced, but we're going to let this thing play out and just to see what happens. So that's my Kyler Murray story. I literally spent all of my offseason just planning to take Kyler Murray, only to trade him 4 weeks into his NFL career for a guy who was injured and missed all of last season. So things are fine. Things are great. I feel really good about that trade. No, I'm actually just terrified. I'm so upset with myself because I would have loved to just have Kyler and Lamar, and I should have just held out. I sold way too soon. So that's a tough pill to swallow, but I already got my eye on another quarterback coming out next year for the NFL draft. More on him in Check's notes, like 8 months or so. Anyway, let's talk about Kyler Murray last season. 2019 finished of quarterback 7 games as the quarterback 1, 6 games as the quarterback 2, 3 games as the quarterback 3. 349 completions, 542 attempts, 3,700 yards, 544 rushing yards, which was second in the NFL behind Lamar Jackson. I know. I sold too early on Kyler. Those numbers are probably all going to go up because he also threw for 24 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, and they just couldn't move the ball to start the season, and now you give them just incredible weapons all the way around. Kyler Murray is going to be an absolute monster in fantasy football this season. When you look at the adjusted score, 18.5 points per game, and that's kind of like what I was talking about. Like, I was expecting more from Kyler. Literally, honestly, Kyler should have been above 20 points per game, and just looking at, 18 is just such an ugly number. That's such a meh number, right? Anybody can put up 18 points per game. I think fucking Phillip Rivers put up 20 points per game last year. And Kyler's new finish was quarterback 12. So he still finished as a quarterback 1, still starter in 12-team leagues. But let's talk about ADP. He's going at quarterback 5 right now in the 5th round, kind of like mid-5th. I have ranked at quarterback 3, and it's as simple as this offense is going to take a step up compared to last season because of the weapons that they have now and just the natural positive regression that this team was bound to have. They literally had one of the lowest touchdown rates in the NFL. It was disgusting how, you guys remember the first few weeks of the season, they literally could not score. Kyler was doing everything himself. The weapons weren't helping out. Christian Kirk was hurt. David Johnson was hurt. They had to trade for Kenyan Drake midway through the year because they needed something on this offense to get them going. So it was really tough for the Cardinals early on, but once they kind of turned this corner, dude, Kyler went crazy. I mean, I'm looking at games right now, 25.4, 30, 28, he had a 32 and a 28 back, and he had a 32 and a 27-9 back-to-back games. He did incredible things. A few games with 3 touchdowns, over 300 yards passing. Kyler's going to be very, very good for your fantasy team this year. And I'm at a 5th round draft price. It's interesting, especially for a guy that I have ranked as quarterback 3 instead of quarterback 5. I think, where's my ADP at? Because I'm curious to who they have above him. So above Kyler, ADP has Deshaun and Dak. And, I mean, you can make the argument, definitely for Dak. I think the argument for Deshaun is a little bit tougher because of the loss of DeAndre Hopkins. Ironically enough. But if you take Kyler, you're not going to be disappointed. You are most likely going to get a guy who's going to finish in the top 5. And in the 5th round, it's just a matter of, do you value the early round quarterback? If you do, Kyler's probably one of the best options for you, once again, because he does have that ability to throw for 4,000 yards and a rush for 600. So that's just going to be an absolute filthy combination for your fantasy team at the quarterback position. And for all we know, depending on how this offense shakes out and how they decide to use Kyler and use his abilities, you are looking at a player, and this is really the big reason why I wanted to draft Kyler in Dynasty, is because you have the ability to draft a guy who can throw for 4,000 yards and rush 4,000 as well. He did it in college. It's why I liked him coming out. And again, I sold too early on Kyler Murray. I'm done talking about him. Now let's talk about, though, he's one of my favorite running backs in the NFL. And I'm so happy because he's finally getting his ability to shine now that he's away from the Miami Dolphins. And that is Kenyan Drake. 2019 finish of running back 18 in standard and 16 in PPR. Kenyan Drake was incredible once he finally got the opportunity to get the ball. 3 games as a running back 1, 3 games as a running back 2, 5 games as a running back 3. He was traded mid-season. I need to pull up what week specifically he was traded. Give me 1 second. Kenyan Drake. Can I get a game log here? Nope. Let's see. I probably should have had this pulled up. My apologies. So he was traded between week 6 and week 7. If you remember, he started off his Arizona career against San Francisco. I believe that was a Thursday night game. He had 15 carries, 110 yards, and a touchdown. Just incredible. He also had 4 targets and 4 receptions for 52 yards. He really just came out the gate, and that really defined what he would do for the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, I'm looking at games of 110 yards on the ground, 137 yards on the ground, 166 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns. He was absolutely cooking for Arizona because he really just fits what they could do. And the other thing about this is Kenyan Drake is also a really, really good pass catcher. Look at that receiving work. 170 touches, 50 catches, with that is unbelievable. 1,800 rushing yards, especially for a guy who only gets the ball 170 times. Love that. 345 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. I want to pull up because the finishes are kind of interesting, I think, to me. Let's see. Yeah. So here's the thing that you have to realize, right? Kenyan Drake got traded in week 6. Yes, week 6 going on week 7. First 6 weeks of the season, he played in 14 games. What games did he miss? Did he miss 12 and 13? Is that gonna tell me? Okay, it doesn't tell me which games he missed. Let's see. Where's the gap at? He started the season. Why is this not telling me? Okay, so it looks like... Why can't I have no idea what games he missed. Hang on, we can pull this up. We have technology. I'm just going to pull up Sleeper again. Hashtag no free ads. Who owns Kenyan Drake in my Dynasty League? Alright. Apologies for that. Yeah, so he missed... Wait, this says he... How did he miss 14? Oh, that's why. That doesn't make sense either, though. So Kenyan Drake should have played... This makes absolutely zero sense. Alright, so something's messed up here. This says Pro Football Reference has him playing in 14 games. I have him playing in 14 games. But looking at Sleeper, unless he was just... Do we have the Pittsburgh game there? That was week 11. Okay, something happened. Alright, something happened between the trade. Maybe it just didn't go through because he didn't play in that game. With Pittsburgh, that would have been Miami's final game against... That would have been Miami's final game before he got traded. So maybe it was just the deactive. Maybe he just wasn't active because he still had 2 bye weeks. I don't know what's going on here. His game log's all messed up. But regardless, this is the point I was trying to make before I just got sidetracked, right? So the first 6 weeks of the season before he got traded, 3 games as a running back 3. So there was 3 of his 5 games were right there, and he finished outside of the top 36. 1, 2, 3 times. No, twice because of week 5 was a bye. So you're looking at everything then onward, it was 3-3-2. And that was really important because once he finally got the opportunity in a much better offense and just a better system for him, he really shined. And that's why I'm really excited for Kenyan Drake this season. His ADP is running back 15 going in the 3rd round. I have him ranked all the way up at running back 7. Now, the reason why I have him ranked so high, and maybe you've heard this stat being floated around already, when you take the Arizona backfield just collectively with David Johnson, Chase Edmonds, and Kenyan Drake, because that backfield really was a complete mess last season. So if you take that backfield and you take the starter for each game and you mold them and you mush them into one player, the Arizona Cardinals starting running back finished the fantasy season at running back 3. On top of that, they are paying Kenyan Drake $10 million with the transition tag and are looking to sign him to a long-term extension. He is just an absolute phenomenal running back, not only for this team, but for this system as well. He just gelled really well with Cliff Kingsbury's offense. And because of that, you are going to see him get a lot more work this season. And again, this offense is going to have positive regression where they are going to hang points up on the board in ways that they just didn't last season. So you combine all those things, you are looking at a player who should easily finish as a top 10 running back. His workload's going to go up as well. So that's 1, 2, 3 or 4 different reasons why Kenyan Drake being drafted at running back 15 is first off incredible value, and honestly, it's highway robbery as well. Give me all of Kenyan Drake this year. I've already tried to trade for him in Dynasty because I love him that much, and I think if he stays with Arizona, he's going to continue to be a top 10 running back in the NFL. I'm just really excited about Kenyan Drake this season and going forward, especially if he does sign a long-term deal in Arizona. Up next, The man of the offseason, the what the fuck just happened, DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins was an interesting case for you last season, specifically because you look at those finishes. So in standard 2019, finished at wide receiver 9, in PPR, wide receiver 5, but you didn't get DeAndre Hopkins that we were all accustomed to, right? It was a really up and down season for him. He only had 4 games as a wide receiver 1, 6 games as a wide receiver 2, and 1 game as a wide receiver 3. 15 games played, 14.5 points per game, new finish of wide receiver 5. It was just weird. So I'm pulling up his numbers right now, and it was just a lot of 2s, just a lot of wide receiver 2 finishes, and that's something that we haven't seen from Hopkins in a long time. And I'm not really sure what the issue was. I mean, the Texans' offense, like, everything really was the same, right? Like, Watson was still pretty good for you last season. You still have the talent that was around this team, being Hopkins, Fuller, and Kenny Stills. You just have, like, that's just a lot of just pass-catching weapons. So nothing really changed there. I don't know what the issue was. But Hopkins just didn't really look great. He didn't feel great either for fantasy. What was one of those things where you got to like the mid part of the season where you're looking at, this is between weeks 5 and week 9. Wide receiver 2, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 2. And just like, were you scared to face DeAndre Hopkins last season? Because there was a point where I wasn't. Week 1, I think you definitely were, because he went absolutely crazy during week 1. But ultimately, it just got to the point where Hopkins wasn't doing Hopkins things. And I'm not sure whose fault that was or how that happened, because you're looking at the stats too, right? 150 targets, unbelievable. 104 catches, unbelievable. I think that number's probably why. I'm going to pull up his game logs real quick. Let's see, Hopkins, or his career averages, should I say. I mean, even then, 104 receptions is third most of his career. The targets are down, definitely. I think that's probably one of the bigger things. But still, he's had seasons of around 150 targets before. So that's nothing. Like, it's not even, let's see. And he missed the game, so that's obviously going to impact things just a little bit. But even still, 7 touchdowns, that's probably where the majority of the regression came, because he had back-to-back seasons with double digits. He's had double-digit touchdowns 3 times, and this was really that first letdown season since 2 back-to-back double-digit touchdown finish. I keep wanting to say tight end. I don't know why. I apologize. But DeAndre Hopkins, now that he's changing teams, he's traded to Arizona for who knows, like, we're not going to get into this. You already know how bad of a trade that was. His ADP is wide receiver 3, going at 110. I have him ranked at wide receiver 5, so I have him ranked lower than ADP, and that's probably one of the rare times that's happened during all of my previews. For me, it's just a matter of, with how weird this offseason is, I'm kind of shying away from guys who are either changing teams or changing quarterbacks. Because I don't know what that chemistry is going to look like. I understand the talent of DeAndre Hopkins, and that's why I still have him ranked as a top 5 wide receiver, because I also believe in the talent of KYLLER Murray, as I just said. But I'd just rather keep the stability of some of the other players, right? So ahead of him, I have Tyreek Hill, Julio Jones, Devontae Adams, and Michael Thomas. And so if like, that's the thing. If at that, pretty much past Michael Thomas, take whoever you want out of that group. But for me, that's my order. DeAndre Hopkins should be a fantasy machine this season, but my expectations are a little bit lowered just because of this offseason, changing teams, changing quarterbacks, changing systems, and we'll see how it goes. And DeAndre Hopkins, admittedly, is just kind of a guy I'm willing to be wrong about, because I'm trying to play this year a little bit safer more than anything. Up next, we're going to continue going through this wide receiver core with Christian Kirk. I really thought Christian Kirk was going to take a big leap last year, and he just didn't, and that was largely just due to injury. He missed 3 games, but he was also hobbled pretty much all season. Wide receiver 46 in standard, wide receiver 40 in PPR, 108 targets, like we'd love to see that. 68 catches, would like to see that number go up a little bit. 700 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like I said, just last season with this Cardinals offense, they just failed to score the ball, and it was really, really frustrating. His weekly finishes: 1 game as wide receiver 1, 3 games as a 2, and 2 games as a 3. 10 points per game, 13 games played, new finish of wide receiver 36. So he's finishing right on that cut line to be a wide receiver 3. His ADP in 2020 is wide receiver 38, going at 808. I have him ranked at wide receiver 39. And to me, this is going to just kind of be a consistent theme without this Arizona Cardinals offense. I still believe in the talent, but now that you are throwing in DeAndre Hopkins, and how does that shake out, right? Because there was no real number one receiver on this Arizona Cardinals team last year. It was pretty much Kyler's going to spread the ball around, and we'll just make it happen game by game, which made it a little bit tough to predict. I think I drafted Christian Kirk in a different league, and I dropped him shortly into the season because there were just other players on the waiver wire who I would rather have. And he was actually a target for me in my Dynasty League as well because I was planning to stack Kirk and KYLLER because they played together at Texas A&M. Ultimately, though, for me, Kirk is just going to be one of those guys where if you want to start him on as a flex play, I don't think you're ever going to start him as a wide receiver 2, which kind of sucks because this offense is expected to take that step forward. But that said, we don't know if KYLLER can support 2 players in the top 24. And if he can, Kirk's a great candidate for this, especially with the role of Larry Fitzgerald, who we're going to talk about, just being decreasingly reduced. So someone is going to have to step in and be that number 2 wide receiver. Next to DeAndre Hopkins, it's probably going to be Christian Kirk. So if you want to take a guy with upside, I think Kirk definitely fits that mold. But ultimately, there's just a lot of other players I think I'd rather have. I'm going to pull up, I'll pull up my rankings first, and then we'll go through the ADP. So, like I said, I have Christian Kirk at wide receiver 38, at wide receiver 39, and you're basically getting into this territory of either guys who are the number 2 option on their team, or just guys who could break out. So the guys that I have ahead of Christian Kirk are Deontay Johnson, Deebo Samuel, who's going to miss some time, but even still, I think I'd rather have Deebo and just wait for the 2 weeks until he gets back on the field. Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, just 2 guys who could be the number 1 option in Houston, and that's just going to be a great offense, just because Deshaun Watson is going to continue to air it out. Michael Gallup, Tyler Boyd, Marvin Jones, Julian Edelman, Marquise Brown. I don't know how many of those players that you would draft over, or that you would draft Christian Kirk over. But to me, honestly, I don't think anybody. And that's why I have him ranked at wide receiver 39, right? I actually just went through and I updated all of my rankings earlier this morning before I recorded this video. And then behind Christian Kirk, I have Darius Slayton, Jamison Crowder, John Brown, Sterling Shepard, Emmanuel Sanders, Anthony Miller, and then the run of rookies. So he's really just in like this fringe territory of, do you want to take your shot here, or would you rather take your shot somewhere else? For me, I lean taking my shot somewhere else, but I don't deny the fact that Christian Kirk could solidify him as a really great wide receiver 2 in the NFL. And finally, we're going to wrap up the Arizona Cardinals team previews. I'm not going to do tight end because I don't think the system values the tight end enough for that tight end to be fantasy relevant week in and week out. So more so just a streaming option overall. But I want to round this out with Larry Fitzgerald, tried and true, one of the only players who has ever defeated Father Time. In 2019, standard wide receiver 42, PPR wide receiver 37, adjusted score 8.7 points per game, all 16 games played, new finish of wide receiver 50. That's not great. And then 2019, his stats overall, 109 targets, which was 1 more target than Christian Kirk last season. Obviously, Kirk missed some time, so that number would have been flipped. Kirk was on pace to obviously have more targets. 75 catches, 804 yards, and 4 touchdowns. 1 game as a wide receiver 1, and that was in week 1. 1 game as a wide receiver 2, and 6 games as a wide receiver 3. I owned Christian Kirk in a 14-team league full point PPR last season. And I started, did I say Christian Kirk? I owned Larry Fitzgerald in a 14-team full-point PPR league last year. That team ended up winning the championship. And I started Larry Fitzgerald multiple times that season. especially just because he's just as sure of a PPR player as you can get, even if he is older in age. I mean, like 75 catches and 800 yards. The guy is damn near 40, right? How old is Larry Fitzgerald? How old? Oh, well, we're gonna find out a fun fact for the day. Larry Fitzgerald is 36 years old, soon to be 37, right? Despite the age, he's beaten Father Time, and he's been just this constant, consistent fantasy player for as long as we can all remember, right? He's Larry Fitzgerald. He doesn't drop catches. He's going to rack up yards for you. And while the touchdown numbers are low, having that kind of floor is an excellent thing to have for a deep receiver in a deep league. So I loved owning Larry Fitzgerald in that 14-team league because that was the deepest league that I've ever played in. And the fact that it was full-point PPR made Larry Fitzgerald even more valuable. So I think it's like in half point he was wide receiver 37. But honestly, I think he finished somewhere like around 30 or so, just because of what he was able to do in terms of yardage and with receptions. But his ADP in 2020 is wide receiver 65. This is all half point. Going in the 14th round, so he's essentially free in your draft. I have him ranked at wide receiver 64, and it's just the thing where they're like, Larry Fitzgerald is still an absolutely incredible wide receiver, just incredibly talented. But now he really is like the third option. Whereas last season, he was still the number one. He was basically 1A and 1B with Christian Kirk. You never really knew what you were going to get from each player. And now that we have DeAndre Hopkins, who is the clear-cut number one, everyone just kind of takes this slide back. And I think Fitzgerald is going to be hurt the most out of all this, unfortunately, because he is just a guy that I really, really like. But it's just kind of the way that things go, right? He's just an older wide receiver. This offense has a lot more mouths to feed now with the addition of Kenyan Drake, who's going to catch the ball 50 times. DeAndre Hopkins going to see 150 targets. Christian Kirk's going to see 120 targets. Now, what does that leave for Larry Fitzgerald? That's kind of the question that I'm asking myself. That said, as I've said all video, if this team is going to make that leap forward and score more red zone touchdowns and just overall move the ball this season, Larry Fitzgerald, I think, now that I'm really just talking about it, I think Larry Fitzgerald might be the epitome of safety in fantasy football this season. One of the things I've been talking about a lot during these previews is I'm trying to decide if I lean more towards taking a late round flyer or if I'm trying to take depth with my last few picks, just because of how crazy this season is going to be. If you watched any of my mock draft videos that I've done so far, I've been really talking about taking handcuffs, which is something I normally wouldn't do. But if I'm drafting a guy like Ezekiel Elliott or Alvin Kamara or Nick Chubb, I'm loving grabbing Pollard, Latavius Murray, or Kareem Hunt just to have that safety net just in case one of those guys catches COVID and is out for 2 to 4 weeks. So if that is the case, Larry Fitzgerald is suddenly a really appealing option, especially in PPR leagues, because I'm not like, that's not even saying if Nuke Hopkins catches Corona, but really if any of your wide receivers catches Corona, you can just slide in Larry Fitzgerald and you can get at least somewhat of a consistent floor week in and week out with potential for upside every single week due to a touchdown or two, because he's just Larry Fitzgerald. He's tried and true, just as consistent of a fantasy player as you can find. But that's going to do it for our Arizona Cardinals team previews. Where did my mouse go? There we go. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. We're doing this thing every single day. A brand new team. What's coming up next? We are doing the San Francisco 49ers tomorrow, so be sure to stick around for that. Also, you can follow me on all social media platforms at FFVulture. RIP TikTok, I think. I'm really sad because we were booming on TikTok over there. But that's fine. You can follow me on Twitter at FFVulture. Instagram is also at FFVulture. The website is ffvulture.com. And lastly, you can shoot me a text, 330-302-1554. That's going to do it for this episode of All-32. Remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever. Later.